we think of a lighthouse, we imagine a solitary tower on a rugged coastline flashing its beacon to guide mariners along their way. Many Nova Scotia lighthouses fall into this category. They are simply a valued aid to navigation. Here is one of them, Boar's Head, located at the entrance to Petit Passage on the Bay of Fundy. However, there are a few lighthouses that are more than that, and one of these is the subject of my talk tonight. Major Beach Lighthouse, more than an aid to navigation. Looking at this slide, I would like to point out three things. The various spelling of major I found in my research. The Friends of McNabbs use M-A-U-G-H-E-R, while I have chosen to use how the lighthouse is listed in the Canadian government publication List of Lights, Buoys, and Fog Signals. The fact that many lighthouses are not the original structure on site. Storms, fires, and lighthouses just becoming old technology meant erecting a new aid to navigation, and Major Beach Lighthouse is no exception. We talk today of rapidly changing technology. However, this change is not exclusive to the 21st century. You will see the evolution of technology on an aid to navigation in terms of lighting, fuel, fog signals, as we move from the construction of the lighthouse in 1826 to present day. As some of you may not be familiar with the Major Beach Lighthouse, where is it located? On the tip of Major's Beach, on the west side of McNabbs Island in the Halifax Harbor. Note, this beach extends nearly a full kilometer out into the harbor, and if unmarked, would clearly be a hazard to navigation. How big a hazard to navigation? Here is a photo, probably taken in the 1930s, of Ralph Conrad standing on a rock off the Major Beach Lighthouse. It was the War of 1812. Sir John Sherbrooke, Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia and the commander of the forces in the Maritimes, decided that a Martello Tower at the end of Major Beach could fire at any ship avoiding the guns of York Redoubt. This tower would be the last of 5 Martello Towers sited into a ring of defense for the Halifax Harbor. Construction was started early 1814, and like many government projects today, there were differing opinions as to whether the tower was needed or not, seeing that the War of 1812 ended in December 1814. Revisions were made to the construction plan, and it was decided to use local building materials when delivery of imported materials did not arrive from England. These factors had the effect of only 8 feet of tower being erected before a stop order was issued in 1816. Before we move on to the next slide, I would like to point out the circular staircase in the center of the tower. Perhaps this tower could be repurposed. (1826). The military continued to operate at the tip of Major's Beach, setting up a temporary light whenever a naval ship was expected. However, commercial shipping went past McNabbs Island at their own risk. Consequently, in 1826, the Nova Scotia Provincial Legislature wanted a permanent light for the inner harbor and voted to spend £1,500 to build it. Lieutenant Governor James Kemp suggested that a light be placed on top of a completed Martello Tower instead of building a new adjacent structure. The Ordnance Board in England agreed to finish the tower at their expense, but with conditions, one of which was the removal of the lantern if the tower was required by the military. In 1828, the Martello Tower, topped by a lighthouse lantern, was completed and lit for the first time. Its fixed white light could be seen for 10 nautical miles. That's 11.5 miles or 18.5 kilometers. Major Beach Lighthouse was the second lighthouse built for the Halifax Harbor, the other being outside the harbor on Sambro Island. It was the seventh lighthouse built in Nova Scotia and the only one built with a Martello Tower base. There is little information online regarding the Major Beach Lighthouse in its early years, only that a lightkeeper, J. Bolsher, was recorded for the first time in 1830. I might have been able to have found more details for the period 1830 to 1850 from the Nova Scotia archives, but you guessed it, COVID restrictions struck again, not possible to visit the archives. In 1851, Dr. Abraham Gesner was seeking to test the use of kerosene as a new source of fuel to replace whale oil being used in Canadian lighthouses, making the claim that kerosene gave a safer, cleaner, brighter light. Major Beach Lighthouse was selected as the test site, and the lightkeeper at the time, David George, took meticulous records of his use of kerosene as opposed to whale oil, proving Gesner right. Kerosene became the primary fuel source in Canadian lighthouses and later abroad. In 1857, the superintendent of the lighthouse service submitted a report on the 31 Nova Scotia lighthouses then operating and submitted the cost of running each lighthouse to the House of Assembly for the province of Nova Scotia. The lightkeeper involved with Gesner's experiment, David George, is reported to have received as annual salary £100, with fuel costing £20 for a total of £120 that year. The superintendent goes on to describe the light source in the Major Beach Lighthouse as being a white fixed light from 6 lamps with reflectors. It was noted that the imperial government in England was responsible for the upkeep of the tower. One reason 1857 expenses were low compared to other lighthouses. 1867, Year of Confederation. Prior to this year, the lighthouse service was formerly maintained by a tax on shipping. However, after 1867, the Year of Confederation, collections of that tax for this service ceased. Responsibility of the lighthouse was transferred from the Board of Works in Nova Scotia to the new Dominion government. In 1868, in its first annual report, the new Department of Marine and Fisheries notes the use of temporary breastworks of timber used to offset eroding effects of storms, a situation that continues to endanger the lighthouse to this day. In 1869, the Major Beach Lighthouse lost its potential military role when the imperial government in England abandoned Sherbrooke Tower as a fort, and all costs of the tower and lighthouse became the responsibility of the Dominion government. That same year, an inspection showed there was much crumbling of the masonry between the outer and inner walls of the Martello Tower. The 1871 annual report of the Department of Marine and Fisheries noted that several light stations situated on exposed parts of the coast had been supplied with life preservers. Major Beach Lighthouse was on that list. 3 life belts, and I cannot determine whether they were made of cork, like this fellow is modeling, or canvas stuff with kapok, as shown on the right of the slide. These 3 life belts were sent to each named station, and they were intended not only for the use of the lightkeeper and family in case of any sudden emergency, but also to assist in saving life in case of shipwreck. Why was this distribution of life belts done? The previous year, the keeper's house on Egg Island on the eastern shore had been struck by a wave in a heavy storm, washed from its foundation and deposited 150 feet away. The keeper and his family escaped into the light tower just in time. The report also noted for the Major Beach Lighthouse that the tower on which this light is placed is in a poor condition and requires considerable repairs. The beach on which it is situated is continually being washed away by the action of the sea, and it will be necessary to protect it from further destruction. It didn't help either that there had been a hurricane that year. In 1875, a breakwater almost 200 meters or 656 feet long was constructed to save the beach and lightkeeper dwelling. The 9th annual report of the Department of Marine and Fisheries stated the cost to do this was almost $6,500. When compared to other lighthouses listed in the report that had expenses mostly in the $300 to $500 range, this lighthouse was proving expensive to maintain with its frequent repairs. One unexpected consequence of building this fine breakwater was that waters in the inner Halifax harbor were now much calmer in a storm. In 1876, a fog bell sounding 7 strokes every minute was erected on site. While there were automated fog bells controlled by a clock mechanism at the time, I believe this one rang when struck by the lightkeeper. As in 1879, the lightkeeper got a raise to hire an assistant to help him ring this bell in times of limited visibility. Note the bell tower in the lower right corner of the photo taken of a light station in Maine around the same time. Apparently there, the lightkeeper trained his big Newfoundlander dog to pull the bell for him. In 1889, a Neptune fog trumpet blasting for 5 seconds every 20 seconds replaced the fog bell that was installed on nearby George's Island. This foghorn was steam powered and needed very little coal to build up pressure to sound the trumpet. According to documentation, this trumpet could be heard at 8 to 10 miles south of the lighthouse. In 1901, the 6 lamps with reflectors were replaced by a 5th order Fresnel's lens. While the distance at which this new light could be seen was the same as that emitted by the old lighting, it was 4 times brighter due to the way Fresnel lens focus a beam with its assembly of lenses and prisms. In addition, the light, which formerly had been a fixed white light, now flashed white every 5 seconds. In 1903, Major Beach Lighthouse became part of the Front Range of the Halifax Harbor Middle Range, the rear range being the McNabb's Island Lighthouse pictured here. To be one of a range pair, the Major Beach Lighthouse must have been painted in some fashion to line up with the rear range's strip. In the book, Lighthouses of Nova Scotia, published in 1973, the author, Davy E. Stevens, speaks of the lighthouse having an orange lantern instead of the usual red. In 1906, the Sherbrooke Tower got a complete upgrade. The lantern was lifted 10 feet by extending the tower. The original round lantern was replaced with a larger octagonal one. The lantern and roof were painted red while the vertical surfaces were painted white. At the same time, a fog alarm building was built to house a diaphragm that blasted 3.5 seconds every 30 minutes. In 1913, a new duplex was built for the lightkeepers along with a boathouse. There was no water source except rainwater collected in a basement cistern. No hookup to phone or electricity until 1970. This is probably the reason why the lighthouse was considered an isolation posting due to its exposure and difficult winter access, in spite of being in the middle of the Halifax Harbor, a short boat ride from the city waterfront. 1914, start of World War I. Major Beach Lighthouse acted as the boundary between the examination area where ships were inspected and the mooring area for ships that passed inspection but arrived too late in the day to clear the submarine nets in the inner harbor. One such ship moored in McNabb's Harbor was the infamous Mont Blanc, loaded with a mix of high explosive and responsible for the December 6, 1917 Halifax explosion. In 1922, the Fresnel's fifth order Fresnel's lens was replaced by a third order Fresnel's lens that could be seen at 18 nautical miles. That would be 33 kilometers or 22.7 miles. In 1931, a severe winter storm damaged the outer wall of the south side of the tower. The tower was repaired and its breakwater strengthening, costing mega dollars. In 1938, Canada Post issued a 13-cent stamp showing the Halifax Harbor. Note the Sherbrooke Tower featuring prominently in the upper center of the stamp. I believe this was the first Canadian stamp to feature a Nova Scotia lighthouse, if not the first Canadian lighthouse featured on a stamp. 1939, start of World War II. Submarine nets stretched from the Majors Beach Lighthouse across the harbor to York Redoubt. 1941, it was wartime, but it was decided to replace the Sherbrooke Tower with a new concrete structure. According to a government source, significant upgrades were carried out in the Halifax Harbor during the Second World War. No doubt it was also due to mounting expenses to repair storm and sea damage to the tower. We can see on this slide that the Sherbrooke Tower lantern was moved to the new concrete tower. This photo also shows the temporary light on a metal tower in between the old and the new towers. In 1945, the old Martello Tower was completely demolished. Very little information available online for Major Beach Lighthouse post-World War II to the late 1960s. Late 1960s/1970, the Major Beach Lighthouse gets a new aluminum lantern, and the Fresnel's lens is replaced with a new Crouse-Hinds DCB-10 air beacon. While the beacon had two bulbs, only one was used as a light while the other was a spare. And I think this is the spare, and this is the one currently in use just by the darkening of the glass of the bulb in use. Why the uncertainty in dates? Chris Mills, former lightkeeper who supplied this photo, stated he had seen it in use at the lighthouse in the late 1960s, while an earlier slide stated there was no electricity until 1970. In 1971, a new electric horn using compressed air was installed, lasting 2 seconds every 18 seconds. This was the same pattern as the diaphone, but a different sound. In 1973, Major Beach was no longer the front range of the Halifax Harbor Middle Range. Instead, the McNabbs Island Lighthouse was abandoned, and 2 steel towers with a white day marker and a red vertical stripe were erected to act as the new Halifax Harbor Middle Range. 1975 is the start of the downsizing of the Major Beach Lighthouse Station. The fog alarm building was demolished and the foghorn became part of the tower. In 1983, the lighthouse became automated, thereby terminating the employment of a lightkeeper. In 1987, the lightkeeper's house and accessory buildings were removed and a helicopter pad constructed. Around the same time, boulders, including granite stones from the original Sherbrooke Tower, were used to create a new breakwater. In 1992, a new electrical light TRB 300 was installed. In 1993, the foghorn was silenced forever. In 2000, another new electric light, ML 15501, was installed, perhaps as it could be solarized. Note the state-of-the-art base for this light. Great free advertising for Baxter Foods. 2003, Hurricane Juan. Environment Canada maintained a weather station at the lighthouse. It was here that the highest winds in Hurricane Juan were recorded, 176 kilometers an hour, or 109 miles per hour. The storm surge cut a new channel of water from McNabbs Cove through the breakwater to McNabbs Pond, thereby ending access from the island to the lighthouse. In 2007, Major Beach Lighthouse was recognized as a federal heritage building. Reasons for bestowing this designation included the fact that the light is identified with an international number, including its importance in terms of navigation and strategic location in the harbor. Its design developed in the 1920s of a tapered concrete octagonal tower to give stability and dependability in harsh weather conditions. It marks the transition between the inner and the outer sections of Halifax Harbor. So what have we learned about the Major Beach Lighthouse? In its early days, it could have doubled as a military fort. Its breakwater calmed inner harbor waters. It acted as test site for a new type of fuel, kerosene. It acted as a boundary of the examination anchorage in World War I. It may have been the first Canadian lighthouse to be used on a Canadian stamp. It anchored one end of submarine nets in World War II stretching across the harbor. It contained a weather station that recorded the highest winds experienced in Hurricane Juan. It is a heritage building protected by FIBRO. For these reasons, Major Beach Lighthouse is definitely more than an aid to navigation. Before we move to questions, I would like to credit Chris Mills, Royce Walker, Nova Scotia Archives, and Canadian Forces for supplying some of the photos we saw in this presentation. I quite enjoyed doing the research on this lighthouse that both our society and the Friends of McNabb's Island Society would like to see preserved for future generations.